Abnormal family. Got another one for you today. There'll also be an 8 o'clock p.m. drop tonight, so don't miss that video either. And don't forget to hit the like. Thank you for all the support that you've given for Hunter. It means a whole lot to us. It really touches our hearts. My family is very grateful to each and every one of you that are helping support him. If you would like to do so, the links are in the description. I am 24 years old and took a trip to the Amazon rainforest in Brazil 4 years ago, making me 20 years old. I was going with a couple of friends who we will call G and F. We had managed to gain a trip there after F's parents, who were loaded with money, as you can say. They were ecstatic about the trip, and though we could manage ourselves there and with the help of guides, have a great time. Us three guys, of course, were almost exploding with all the excitement, as our trip from our small Alabama town to Brazil would begin in a few hours. The flight overall would take 22 hours, and since we were leaving at 5 in the hours, oh man, we were tired, but we would arrive around 3 or 4 in the afternoon the next day. The three of us slept on a plane pretty much the whole way, and when we woke up we were already descending. I could see the Rio de Janeiro airport below us, and I took a couple of pictures of the scene below us and the Jesus statue. I was wide awake, as were G and F, and we were desperately praying that the descent would hurry up. Once we were on the ground, we collected our bags and saw our taxi was waiting for us. The guy in the car spoke no English, so we just showed him the map we had and knew where we were going. The car ride took an hour. Our destination was some very remote village where our guide, Francisco, was waiting for us. Francisco was an interesting character, about 30 years old, and he had wavy brown hair with dark brown eyes. He seemed like a put-up-with-no-crap guy, and with a most serious expression on his face. Us three, me, F, and G, shook his hands. Francisco spoke broken English, but nothing we couldn't understand. He gradually opened up to us and got used to us. He planned to take us deep in the rainforest to some lagoons in the Amazon River itself to see big snakes and other animals. We were in the village of Laguape, a neat little quiet place where all the people were warm and friendly, as we were with Francisco and his family, who welcomed us and gave us a pretty spacey room for the night. We had a delicious meal of beans and rice and some delicious chicken, along with some sweets that I do not remember. The next morning, G shook me awake along with F and cussed us to get out of our lazy beds. Me and F quickly got dressed, and minutes later Francisco came in and told us to go. The car ride to the lagoon was 20 minutes, since it was roughly full of rainforest itself. The lagoon was small, and by the time we stepped out of the car, the insects and birds greeted us. The humidity was great, but we were bursting with excitement. Francisco all of a sudden stopped us. "Guys," he said, in his accented English, "you need to pay attention to this. We are spending 2 nights with a tribe called the Guarani. They are a friendly tribe and have already contacted them." I said, "Thank God they're friendly. Aren't there isolated, dangerous tribes here?" And Francisco said, "Whatever you do, stay close to the village if you decide to explore a bit, but you must stay close. And most importantly, when we're on the river, keep your head down a little bit. Sometimes they will fire arrows at you, but do not worry. We'll be fine." G and F laughed. Maybe we'll see some shrunken heads by the end of this trip. Hopefully not ours. Francisco's scowl deepened. "There is nothing funny. My own friend went too far away from the village and was never seen again. I know this was no animal because I took a small hunting party and we found arrowheads and some blood where he had been going." I felt a chill. I saw that G and F's faces had darkened. We exchanged glances. I realized this could be dangerous, but deep down I was still excited and determined to show it. When we arrived at Gorham's village, we were surprised at their looks. They had tattoos and nose rings, and some wore masks. The leader, whose name was Julan, or something on the lines of that, awkwardly shook hands with us. as he and Francisco conversed in their native language. We got to the boat, and pretty soon we're speeding down the Amazon. The scenery was amazing, as we saw jaguars staring at us through the trees. We saw alligators swimming through the water. A couple of minutes later, Francisco pointed at the water. We almost dropped our cameras. G&F muttered a surprised curse under their breaths. A massive anaconda, the biggest snake in the world, was gliding through the water. We were in shock. We had seen the top predators of the Amazon in under 20 minutes. The snake had to be 25 feet long and about 200 pounds. Slowly, it sunk under the water. And surprisingly, everything went downhill. Francisco started saying, "It can't be possible. We have only seen the dangerous animals." This sounded ridiculous, as there were plenty of animals to see, but Francisco seemed to be scared. So terrified, suddenly he tried turning the boat around. F started screaming at him. Francisco suddenly jumped at him, trying to put his hand over his mouth. F desperately tried to push him away, but Francisco hissed at him. "Hush, boy. This is signals of the wild. There is something dangerous here." For a reason, I believe him, and I saw that G did too. F had calmed down, but was breathing heavy, angry breaths. I wanted to get out of here, out of the craziness of this trip. This wasn't what I signed up for. The first day was going downhill, and I wanted out of this crazy scenario. Francisco was crazy, and this trip was crazy. As I was pondering this, I realized something I hadn't before. The forest was eerily quiet. G and F had obviously picked up on this. As they looked around Francisco for some reason, he was breathing very heavily also. All of a sudden, we heard our names be called. It was the leader of the Guarani. We had met before, but it could not be possible. They had only one boat, and we were definitely a good 5 miles away from the village. It said in English, "Francisco, come here, where it is safe. It's dangerous out there." The voice also called out our names. It couldn't be the leader because he could not speak English, but I knew it was his voice because the gruff, raspy voice of the leader had. Plus, he rolled his R's when he spoke. The voice seemed to boom around us, and Francisco desperately tried to turn the boat around, but it was stuck. We couldn't move out of our place. I was almost crying, as if we were far from the village. And we had no radios with us, as the Guarani owned none. Our phones had no signal out here, and worst of all, we could have unrecognized tribes out here who could hurt or kill us. "Francisco, what's happening?" F asked. Francisco barely whispered. "It's the Mapingura." I looked at him and stammered, "What is that?" Something clearly did not want us here, and it was dangerous. "What you call Bigfoot." Francisco crouched lower in the boat. I knew about Bigfoot, but I thought it could only be just fiction, right? "He must have saw us outsiders," he explained. "He will kill you if he gets a hold of you." Francisco proceeded to say that it can be 10 feet tall, and all the natives, even the killer ones, would look up to the prey for this huge creature. All of a sudden, we heard a huge splash. I turned toward the sound, but I really should not have. There, a good 20 feet away from the boat, I saw the most scariest and horrifying thing I would see in my life. I saw the most ugly and massive creature I'd ever seen. It shouldn't have existed, but there it was. It looked like an American Bigfoot, but it had one large, evil eye. It had 2 large fangs that looked about 4 inches. Its arms were huge, and they looked like if the things got a hold of you, it would just snap you in half. And I knew, and I very well believed it could. I had begun to wade in the water. It had begun to wade in the water. G was crying, and F was yelling at Francisco, who was frantically trying to make the boat turn. To hurry up, the creature had begun to swim toward the boat, screaming unnaturally. No thing of this world could make that sound. Then, as it got 10 feet from the boat, I sank into the water. I had fell out of the boat. Francisco yelled at me to grab the side of the boat. I reached up, grabbed the side of the boat, and when I did, the boat became unstuck. We then go ripping up the river. I'm almost drowning because the water is splashing me in the face, but I'm so glad to get out of there. And as my friends pulled me on board, we looked behind us. The creature was in the middle of the water, just staring at us, like he was treading. And then he swam back to the other shore, walked out of the water, stared at us as we went off into the wild. It then let out a roar we heard through the trees as we was making the bends through the water. I hope that I never see this thing again, and I will never go back to the Brazilian rainforest. I hope you all enjoyed that encounter. Uh, it was a unique encounter. I have heard that they do swim, so I believe it is possible that they did swim out to their boat. And I think it would be pretty scary to be out in the boat and see something just come into the water and start swimming at you. But pretty unique story. I've never heard one quite like this, and I wanted to share it with you. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Until next time, guys, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner, and we'll see you on the next one.